Hi, fellow tea lovers. Settle in, because we've got a story. I'm Nell.
And I'm Rose. And today we're bringing you the tea.
Across
So I'm really excited about this topic because it really just gives me a chance to tell a funny story.
Yes.
But it's also something I'm really interested in. So I sent Nell a comic earlier this week because I had an entirely different story set up. And as per usual, the universe stepped in and said, nah. So I sent her this XKCD comic. And if you're not familiar with XKCD, Randall Munroe, he was a scientist at a pretty high level that was also writing hilarious comics. And so he has amazing science and math jokes and is just really funny in general, and clearly found his calling because he was so good at the comic thing that he didn't have to pursue his original career and decided to just do the comic thing full time. And I applaud that because you're clearly an artist, sir. There's a saying, there's an XKCD for everything. It literally has its own little Wikipedia explanation page. It's a rabbit hole of a time, and I highly recommend it.
Nice, okay.
He also wrote a couple of books that were answers, like serious answers to every weird science question anybody had ever emailed him.
Ooh,
like what would happen in the first 5 minutes if the Earth stopped turning? Like, practically speaking, what would be the first thing that would happen? And he tries to answer those, and I also really recommend it. It's hilarious. The first time I brought it home, because I tend to buy multiple copies of things, but the first time I brought it home, we actually sat and had one of those weird moments where we were reading the book out loud to the 5 people in the living room, and it was a great time.
I love that.
It was so fun. But yeah, so I'm sitting up at 3 a.m. I almost texted you at 3 a.m. with
you
this.
You could have my
hilarious.
ringers off.
I know you tell me that, but I worry. And I'm flipping through XKCD, and it is number 776 about insomnia. And it wasn't wholly insomnia-based. I have a job that I work a little bit later in the night, and so my sleep schedule is shifted. So I'm just very often up at 3. Midnight to 3 is also the preferred hour of awesome working time. I don't know why it's my creative time, but it is.
Cool.
And so these guys walking around, the sleep deprivation madness worsens. Things seem unreal. Am I even awake? Maybe I'm dreaming. And so he's having all of these ruminations, and then the squirrel walks up to him and goes, "Listen, buddy, I wouldn't worry about that."
That's not the problem.
That is not the problem. And squirrels came up in 3 different contexts. My poor parents have been invaded by squirrels, and by the time they really clocked the situation, it's not just that they're living in the walls, it's that they've built a society and they're now ringing the gong to dress for dinner, okay? Assimilation is imminent.
Well, and they're the people in the wall from... What was that cartoon?
Oh,
Solar.
Yes, that whole People in the Wall storyline is why I kept watching that. That was intense.
And they would only give them one episode, and I got to the part where I would just Google which episode that was. Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes the sub-story ends up taking over. Like in American Dad, the Golden Poop storyline, there's people that have stitched it together on YouTube, and it's like a whole little movie, and every time it came up, everyone in the room was, it's the Golden Poop. It was kind of fun, and was maybe a little bit more fun than we were having with the rest of the story.
No, I mean, I definitely was way more interested in the people in the wall than in the aliens.
Mm-hmm. It was cool. I enjoyed it. I watched it multiple times, but,
Okay.
It's no Archie.
Yeah, sorry. I love Archie.
Yeah, and so it reminded me of my favorite paper that I wrote in college, which was about the medieval usage of squirrel imagery.
Okay.
And of course, there's a long story. I had this problem later on in undergrad where I had satisfied most of my degree requirements, but there was an upper division credit requirement that either I had ignored or had not been explained properly to me. I won't blame anybody, but it was a little bit devastating to come up and say, "Hey, I'm ready to graduate," and have them go, "Haha, you have 2 years worth of credits left that we didn't tell you about." Because I'd already satisfied all of my degree requirements, I just had to take this obscenely large number of upper division credits, and I could do anything I wanted. And because I was so interested in medieval history, I ended up, a lot of the classes I took were skewed that way. And that ended up being really helpful, so good things came out of it. But because I had that extra time, I ended up meeting this amazing professor that was actually instrumental in getting me into grad school. She was an alum of the same school and gave me all kinds of amazing advice. But she was someone I still consider a very good friend, and every once in a while we would go over to that Celtic pub by the university. And get British food, because we were both nostalgic over it, because I got to travel to England a lot as a child, and she'd gone to school there, and we'd just sit and witter and bitch, and she was always so funny about, well, I'm not going to order a beer because you're still a student. I'm like, that's
Don't
okay.
You have her desk?
I have her chair. I inherited her office chair when she moved, and I refuse to get rid of it, even though it's a little bit rickety now. Just because it's such good memories.
Yeah, I know. I got you.
So in the second class that I was taking with her, the first one I took with her was Medieval Tales of Wonder. I'd already been very face deep in medieval research anyway, just out of personal love, that it's just always been my armchair.
That's your Roman Empire.
That's my Roman Empire. Yeah. So I ended up taking another class of hers the next semester, and it was so much fun because she had a reputation. She was just very serious. She was serious about her profession, and it irritated her greatly when people didn't take it seriously.
Nice.
As a student, that can be a little bit intimidating, but I really enjoyed her company. I've had a lot of intense people in my life that I really enjoy. They're my people.
I love that. And, I mean, obviously, I think it's got to be crushing, right? You think you're going to graduate, and they're all, not just one more class.
Denied. 2 years.
Like, you can't even walk and take a summer class.
Nope.
But something really nice came out of it.
It really did. And she was the one that recommended the grad school that I ultimately went to. Her recommendation helped me along. She helped me pick a place to live that I was comfortable with. I'm so glad to have had her in my life. But yeah, so we're in the second class, and it's general medieval research topics. And so what the point of the class was to learn how to research. I had really already ridden that bull, and I was riding it to work at this point. Like, I had done a lot of research.
You're so lucky. I'm totally coming to you when school starts. And the fall, I think I have to take research strategies too. I don't remember what it's called, to be honest. But it's just my last required class. And then 3 electives.
Yeah, but the class, it wasn't going super well for the rest of the class. And there was this come to Jesus moment where she just gave this fire and brimstone. What are you doing? You understand these concepts, and I know that, and you're not even trying, and I am embarrassed for you. And I thank my lucky stars, I had already talked to her about my grade, about that project, and was fine.
Yeah.
But I was still like, oh, wow, yep.
Nothing like that speech where you feel the shame that it's come to this, and you're like, absolutely casting it over your shoulder at, like, the people behind you who don't pay attention. But you're also, like, embarrassed that the professor had to come to this point, too.
I'm getting the secondhand embarrassment. It's like a sunburn. And so she sets this project, any medieval topic.
Wow.
Because you're just learning how to research pick anything you want. And I kind of came up afterward and I was like, you've met me. Do you really want to give me that kind of license? And she was like, yeah, no, seriously, anything you want. I just need these guys to actually write real papers.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. I picked the symbology of squirrels. I think I originally titled it iconography, which I, in retrospect, have come to realize is probably not the right word. Because iconography really implies religious, and it's not always a religious image.
Yeah.
Quite the opposite, actually.
Isn't it funny the difference between upper level classes and lower level classes' paper expectations?
Oh, yeah. It's night and day. I mean, this is short compared to anything I wrote in grad school.
Oh, yeah. Even probably compared to, like, your 100 or 200 level classes. Whenever someone's like, hey, you're an English major and I'm writing a paper, and I am a freshman or sophomore in college, and I need help. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Because you have to tread it so lightly.
You really do, because you can take over the path of the writing so easily, and then they're not really gaining anything, and you just spend a lot of time.
And have you ever had this happen, where you put out a paper for them that you think you've made better, but in retrospect you're like, oh no, it was way too advanced for that class. They weren't looking for any of those things. They weren't looking for, like, a witty idea. They were looking for, did you make 5 paragraphs with 5 sentences minimum, and have transition sentences, and a clearly defined thesis?
It was funny, too, going back and reading, because I love the material. Like, it's actually just a really interesting story, but I went back and read the original paper, and was I ever a sarcastic 20-year-old? Oh,
you've kind of made me want to go home and see if I can find any of mine. I feel like they're probably sitting on an external hard drive, the ones that used to be the size of, like, a red brick.
Yeah, right. This is my hard drive bag.
Somewhere in my garage, and that's unfortunate.
But yeah, so the story of the squirrel in medieval art actually turned out to be incredibly fascinating, despite my sarcastic ass.
Okay.
Early references to squirrels as a mythological entity. Ratatosk is the first thing that comes to mind for me. He's the squirrel deity in Norse mythology, and his story is that he lives in the world tree. He's the gossip. He takes tales from the dragon that gnaws on the root of the world tree, and he runs them up into the branches, and he plays telephone and gets it all screwed up, and then everybody fights. And so he's this really irritation-causing, he's like a mini Loki. I don't think they actually have an association, but would adore an adaptation where Ratatosk was his pet. I don't know why. Maybe I just haven't encountered that. I think that would be fun.
Okay, I'll ask the kiddo, because the kiddo has seen the Loki movies.
Oh.
Because everyone has a crush on...
Oh, Tom Hiddleston. Yeah, that's serious for some folk. I mean, yeah. I can see the appeal.
Yeah, he's handsome.
I don't really have a huge number of celebrity crushes to where I would put them on the laminated card, you know, with the pass that you get in your relationship. Anybody get the Friends joke, I'm sure.
I love Paul Walker still. Yeah. And I know that having, gone through Me Too and everything, that he might not have made it through that with reputation unscathed. But I haven't digested my feelings on that yet, and that's not what this episode is about.
No, yeah, it's super complex.
One day, I'll tackle all of the love I have for Paul Walker.
Well, where the hell was that?
Loki. You'd like to see a movie
I would love to. Where was it his pet? Yeah, no, it's like how I used to say one of my partner's mother's dogs looked like what Wolverine's dog would look like in retirement. Like when he's puttering around the house in his 80s and like cutting the hedges with his claws and stuff. This is the dog that would have been following him around.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you with a pop culture reference, but there's like a movie coming out with Wolverine and Deadpool.
Yes, I have seen that.
Have you seen the dog?
No.
It's Deadpool's dog. This dog is named Peggy, and I believe last year it won the title of Britain's Ugliest Dog.
Oh, I need to see this.
Yeah, Peggy is a pug crossed with a Chinese crested.
Oh, no. I can already imagine.
All right, let me pull up a picture of Miss Peggy here. Oh, Peggy was on the red carpet last night.
Oh, my Lord. That's the most adorable thing. Oh, it's like you glued pom-poms to a leather pouch.
Yep.
Oh my God, and the tongue. He's perfect for that movie.
Right, that's Peggy. Okay, sorry. That's not Wolverine's dog.
No, this one was basically like if you shrunk a corgi and then kind of Wolverined up its face.
Nice.
Is all. Like, but she was real fat and like kind of like those little sausage waddle dogs, and I was like, this would be Wolverine's dog in retirement.
Yep.
Oh, but I want to show you a picture of Ratatosk because squirrels in general, animals in general in medieval imagery, they're not visually accurate, but it's almost never because they didn't have the ability to make it visually accurate. Like you can recreate things in a very realistic way, but especially in manuscripts or just like quick reference things, that's not what you're trying to convey. You're trying to convey the meaning of the animal as much as you are the visual representation. And what you get is some wild results.
What if in the future somebody finds Far Side comics and thinks that all humans were basically looking like that?
Exactly. You don't know what's going to survive. It is not necessarily that these people thought things looked like this, although sometimes. Bestiaries are just a really amazing and interesting thing we're going to talk about in a second. So, this is a manuscript illustration of Ratatosk, which if you go to Wikipedia and just type in Ratatosk, first thing.
That does not look like a squirrel.
Right. It looks like a fox standing the wrong way up with a dildo stuck to his head. Honest. And it's his tusk. But so one of his kennings, quick aside what a kenning is, because it's just a kind of fun fact that I love. A kenning is a nickname for someone that kind of describes one of their traits. So if I was to call Nell, hey, smiley face, that would be a kenning. And it would be more so if I was to refer to somebody else in a different conversation, like, smiley face, that would be a kenning.
Okay. Miley Cyrus's legal name was not Miley. She was called Smiley. And eventually changed her name from, I believe, and I might get this wrong, Destiny Hope to Miley. because that's what she'd been called her whole life, from being Smiley.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Make that stick. There's some people that do not know my actual name in real life that have met me that have only met me by my nickname, which I find hilarious.
Don't know if your partner has ever said in front of me not even your full legal name, but just like your name.
My actual name?
Like,
no, it's so
he's
weird
never
when he
been
does.
like, Rose is standing over there. Instead, he's like,
Cat's standing over there.
Yeah, unless maybe we're talking about the fact that they never say Rose.
Right, if it has come up in conversation, maybe. But yeah, if he's just referring to me third person, it's usually Captain. That's another long, funny story that was just for a different day.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I've met people where he's just casually, offhandedly introduced me and then wandered off, and then it has never come back up again for years later. Yeah, and so one of Ratatosk's kennings is Drill Tooth, which, if you look at a squirrel, you can see exactly where that came from.
Okay.
But then the symbolic meaning telephone game, Sawtooth can evolve into, oh, you've got a tooth on the top of your forehead, which is what seems to have happened here.
Okay.
So another early but slightly later reference, this is the Bewcastle cross, and it's this, looks like an obelisk that was originally a cross, but the top's been taken off in the interim. Obelisk is just a large pointed kind of column monument, like the Washington Memorial.
Oh, okay.
That's an obelisk. But this is an Anglo-Saxon cross that is at the Church of St. Cuthbert. It's one of the really, really early kind of crossover conversion period monuments. And by conversion period, I mean this crossover between Christianity and paganism, especially in England, is a really interesting mishmash of a time, but it's called the conversion period. The Thor's hammer that I wear is a conversion period cross, actually. It's both. It's based off of it's called the Wolf's Head Thor's hammer, and it's a reproduction of it. But so if you put it one way, it's a Thor's hammer. And if you put it the other way, it's a cross. And it was a result of that time period where you might come across somebody from either side, no matter where you're going. So if you flip it one way, you're one,
I'm 100% thinking Vikings.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the Bewcastle cross, that's from that same period. So you have a lot of really super pagan imagery interspersed on this gigantic cross that is clearly meant to proclaim to everybody in the area, we are Christian now. It's got these really beautiful, intricate carvings, and if you look closely at the bottom of one of the faces, they almost look like a squirrel and a mermaid had a baby. Their tails are kind of like wrapped around the vines and everything. Those are meant to be squirrels.
Yeah, I would never go with squirrel. I would go with bird, and then I would be like, no.
You're like bird.
It's like
with the nose.
Gecko became a mammal.
Yeah. Yes. And that's the same thing when you're depicting things in a symbolic way. You're not really that concerned with the squirrel that was sitting out your window and making sure it looked like that. You're trying to convey several levels of meaning beyond realism.
Yeah.
So the Bewcastle cross squirrels, the whole thing is meant to represent the tree of life.
Okay.
And so it's really cool as well because it's a Christian symbol that is also incorporating a very fundamental pagan belief, Yggdrasil and tree of life. And so even though the squirrel is no longer representing Ratatosk, he's still running up and down the tree of life telling tales. He's still representing kind of a similar state. And I do want to take a little bit of a sidetrack to bestiaries like we were talking about. Because we're talking about depicting animals in a multi-leveled symbol zone. When I say bestiary, a bestiary is a book that describes animals. Kind of like a dictionary of animals, but they didn't have any distinction between mythological animals and real animals.
Oh.
So the same reference book would tell you what a squirrel is like that would tell you what a unicorn is like in the same very serious academic terms.
Okay.
But throw into that mix, you have people writing about animals that they've seen maybe 5 of, even if they do exist. That's where you get those crazy, hilarious elephant illustrations where it looks...
No one can agree on what it looks like.
Oh, yeah, no, because that's the guy who painted the thing, who had a thing described to him that also has never seen it because it was described by a third party that saw it when he was 4.
Yep.
The description of squirrels in Pierre de Beauvai's bestiary, which is 13th century. So it refers to the red squirrel as an associate of the devil.
Oh.
Because he has red fur and very often his ears look like horns. So clearly he's suspect. They were known to be so quick to anger that they would often burst into flame.
Oh.
Would be another thing that obviously everyone knows about squirrels. I mean, clearly.
I mean, I knew that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because, of course, they're very related to the muscelier, which is also a very real creature that has a squirrel tail, teeth like a boar, the body of a small hare. It jumps from limb to limb through the trees, devastating both leaves and fruit on its way. The creature then makes a neat nest at the base of a tree, and to quote Pierre de Beauvais, its nature is so hot that it causes the tree to dry up and die. This is a mythological creature. But it's approached with the same gravitas. Like, well, squirrels, they're tiny little angry devil creatures, but really they won't kill the whole tree. Now watch out for that muscelier, because it might eat your children, but it will definitely kill your orchard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, I mean, in practicality, squirrels were considered to be a really appropriate pet for ladies. Like, we've sort of moved forward into the 12th, 13th century here. So it's considered almost along the same lines as having, like, a King Charles Spaniel. Like, oh, she has the squirrels, and she's so sweet and refined. Look at that little leash. And so as we move through time, squirrels are becoming less and less sort of, I guess, devious feeling. Because they're everywhere. Everybody has, like, a side story about a squirrel.
Yeah, my high school bestie adopted one.
Yeah.
A wild one. She kept feeding it.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I saw her in person, her person was like, she's feeding it Waffle House or something. And I was like, that's never going to live in the wild.
Yeah, great pets apparently. Something like a monkey, but less showy.
Like a monkey, but less showy.
Like a monkey, but less showy. Yeah, no, you're kind of like a little bit of a weirdo if you have that sort of trained monkey, but the trained squirrel,
I want the trained bird to steal everyone's.
Right, that one that goes and steals money and brings it back to that guy's drawer. I mean, you don't want to, but you want to.
I know.
Yeah.
Gems. Things.
Bring me treasure.
Right?
I have some coins on the wall that you walk past to come up to my front door. And my mother-in-law asked me once, like, why do you have 15 cents on the wall there? And I was like, well, I was trying to make friends with a crow, and it was the shiniest thing that I had to hand at the time.
I've seen that so many times.
She's going to be one that's ever asked. Because there was a crow hanging out in the tree, and I thought, oh, if I give you something shiny, you might keep coming back. All I had was change for a minute, which I don't know if it's weird to pick up or if he just didn't want it. But then, of course, laziness sets in, and now there's just 15 cents.
So, honestly, every time I walk by it, my assumption was somebody was standing here, someone who lives here, I don't know, and was like, oh, I have these coins. And maybe they were, like, playing with them. Maybe they were in their pocket and annoying them, and they left them there. Maybe you guys, like, had change in your pocket when you got back from the store. Okay, I'm very interested in that much better story.
That's why the weird amount of change is on the wall.
Okay.
I was trying to make friends unsuccessfully with a crow.
Yeah, okay.
Should have got a monkey. But okay, so for the less cute side of it, wearing squirrel, the use of squirrel fur in clothing is actually, like, weirdly more complex than you would think. Did you remember in I, Tonya, love that movie a lot, when she has the rabbit fur coat and everybody's making fun of her? That is wildly confusing to the medieval mindset. Like, rabbit is totally valid. Squirrel, however, is highly prized to the point that when we get to sumptuary laws, which are laws about what you can wear and why.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah, actually address them in detail. It was called vair. It was very highly prized. It's like a two-toned fur. That, to be honest, is kind of pretty. But what's interesting is vair squirrels were considered highly prized, for their product, highly prized as a pet, kind of upper tier animal, if you will. Whereas the red squirrel, at this point, they're still stuck in devil land because they're so red squirrely and devious looking. They're probably carrying tales to the devil about you, so don't let them in your yard.
It seems like it takes a lot of squirrels to make a clothing item.
And that's super true, and that's actually why they ended up showing up in sumptuary laws, because it was a high status item, and so somebody who wants to look high status is going to wear a lot of vair. That portrait that we were talking about, the Arnolfini portrait, the woman in the green dress, has vair sleeves.
Oh.
And they're that rich that they're having that crazy-ass painting of them done in that crazy-ass room that they own. She's only wearing edging of vair. Because it does take a lot of squirrel to create that. It is going to be expensive, and so the more status you have, the more squirrels you're allowed to kill and wear. And so in the 1279 French sumptuary law, quote, it is ordered that no one, neither duke nor count nor prelate nor baron nor others, whether cleric or layman, may not have made or possess more than 4 sets of vair robes in a year.
Whoa.
So, on the one hand, the nobility should not be seen to spend so much money that all of that vair would cost, but also there's not enough of it to go around. You're keeping it for the very fancy people. It's exactly like ermine. That's why the white swath of fur with the black dots is considered so royal.
Oh.
It doesn't have dots. It's ermine tails attached there, and you're wearing the fanciest, scarcest, softest, most luxurious thing that you can. You're the ruler of this entire place, and even you can only afford to have just the tail attached. We've talked about this before. When you're running at like 1279, this is the good period of good weather, of fruitful harvests where the population is growing, the middle class is growing, everybody's got better economic tools around, but because of that, you're getting a larger population, so there's no longer as much to go around. Mm-hmm. So one portion of the response from the ruling class to this was to clamp down on the luxury items that the everyday man could buy, like legally. There was a Burgundian statute in Burgundian, which is a little region in northeastern France, a little bit centralized. It was its own duchy. During the 100 Years' War, they were one of the factions that were trying to claim the French throne, and they ended up allying with the English for quite a bit of the 100 Years' War.
Yes.
So Burgundy, they're their own separate entity a lot of the time, but it is technically France if we're talking about modern borders. I always think of it as the place where the fashions come from.
Okay.
Because they were the ones to popularize some of the biggest, boldest, brightest medieval fashions that we recognize, like the big, tall cone hat with the gauze coming off of it, the princess hat. That is a Burgundian style. They had a penchant for very, very long shoes.
Sweet. My first thought is cowboy boots.
And it's not dissimilar, but they're cloth. And so there was a law that if you were a member of the nobility and you had caught somebody wearing pointy shoes that were longer and pointier than they were socially allowed to do so, you personally are allowed to cut them off.
What the heck?
Yep. Those were the kinds of laws that they were passing to try and maintain their access to the luxury markets because there were too many of them poors coming up and getting money, and they're affording things. Because Ver was such a big fashion and visual item, it's not really that surprising that it creeps into heraldry.
No.
Which, because that's how you're describing yourself to the world. In a world where you're not describing things in written language nearly as often as you're describing them in images, heraldry matters a lot.
Oh, yeah. Every single outfit that Princess Catherine wears is so scrutinized, and they're like, this is a tribute to this, and this tiara means this, and these earrings are that. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Those symbolic moments still exist. We're just not using them as our primary source to describe each other anymore. You're not allowed to make up your heraldry. You're adding things, you're tweaking things, but there's tradition and rules to be taken into account.
Yeah.
But you see it evolve over time. It's kind of like a filler shape, to be honest. It's one of those you just quite often see in the background, but it adds to the look of it. It's something that you're adding a little bit of nuance to the meaning of an already very heavily symbolic thing.
Okay.
So it's almost like a tessellation pattern. It's like a base pattern. It's what you would put down first and then start building your animals up on it. It's almost like a bell, kind of like just a wave curve in successive lines. Real simple. But you can sort of see, it's almost like if you were looking at squirrel tails attached to something.
Yeah.
The unicorn rampant that was on the tea tin we were talking about, that's His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, that's heraldry.
Okay.
Yeah. So as a general heraldic device, it's whatever. But it's when you start seeing people creating like personal seals and more decorative elements when you're kind of moving more towards the 16th century that you get some really funny stuff.
Okay.
So in English sources, a visual representation of a squirrel often has a double entendre. When you're pairing a squirrel with a cock...
As in a chicken?
As in a rooster, you're implying a cock and balls. It's meant to be a sexual reference. There's this woodcut that is named The Mercenary's Whore. I don't actually remember the story behind that title, but it's a die-cut piece. It's something that you would use to stamp out little spangles to put on your outfit, or if you wanted like a badge to wear that was sparkly and pretty. So it's this image of a lady, almost like Scales of Justice sort of stance, and on one shoulder she has a squirrel, and on one shoulder she has a rooster. And what that implies is that you're like, hey, you're a kind of a Don Juan kind of guy, like cock and balls. Ha, look at that. People love dirty jokes.
I appreciate the subtlety of those jokes compared to now.
Oh, yeah.
you just buy a set of truck balls and they hang off the back of your truck and ew.
The instinct is always there, but the execution matters.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's not uncommon to see people do personal heraldic devices and personal decorative elements that incorporated a squirrel, particularly as a single guy.
Okay.
That was out to sow his wild oats. Putting a squirrel on you in a decorative visual way in the 16th century in England is saying, I crack nuts, man.
Right, and then you could be like, swipe left, swipe right.
Yes.
Mentally.
Yes.
Okay.
There's earlier sexy sexual references to the squirrel, like you were talking about the Roman de la Rose a few episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Squirrels definitely pop up in that as a double entendre, where the main character, Robin, his lady is saying, like, what is that commotion going on in your pants? And he says, oh, it's a squirrel that's trying to get out, that's been trapped. Ha 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 ha, you know.
Wow.
They're called feblos. They're like little short stories that are just like often meant to be bawdy, like, oh, tell a funny, dirty joke at a party kind of deal. There's another reference to his squirrel is searching for the nuts she ate yesterday.
Wow.
In, medieval literature terms, it's like, wow, put a neon sign on that. But, you compare it to dirty jokes today, and it's just, oh, that's cute. It's just really interesting to me that in all of the redemption arc that the squirrel gets as this sort of ubiquitous background creature, that it's not a creature that is exciting or even new to hardly anyone that encounters them, but they were so important in terms of symbolic meaning that they were worth being snipped up and relabeled.
Wild.
And so that weird path brought me to being like just really in love with squirrels as creatures.
Right, I don't dislike squirrels. I don't want them in my house.
No, absolutely
like your
not.
parents.
No. I think more than anything I liked about the project is that you can dartboard anything. You can think of a word and there is meaning just stacked up behind it for centuries if you go looking.
What about the word skibbity?
Well, all right. Yes,
just
there's
kidding,
exceptions. No, that's important because I feel like I sound like the kind of person that hates slang, and
no,
I
but
don't.
You love
I don't really. I love it because that's how language evolves. Just because it's irritating in the immediacy does not mean that your language is not moving forward and evolving because of it.
Right. Yeah, sometimes when my nieces talk to me, I'm like, what are we saying?
I mean, I willfully skip a lot of it, but I appreciate its existence.
Yep, it's important. Don't forget, go to our website, check it out, like, share, and leave us a review.
Also take a look at the really adorable squirrel pictures that we promised you.
Yes, we'll have them. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.